and things have been really happening in the last, I don't know, 24 or 48 hours. But we're going to try to just stay focused on the big ones that are still in play, where we still have an impact or an opportunity to influence. And then, as a reminder, council will do a big debrief analysis at the end of the session, and bring that information back in that, I don't know when we have it on, September study session, where we'll do a big debrief of the impact to Broomfield, and then also talk about kind of rules and procedures and how we move into 2025 in the session. And appreciate, I know some emails yesterday or on Saturday on feedback of what could work. So we will discuss all of those structural conversations, as well as overall impact of the 700 plus bills on Broomfield, at a later date. Today, we're going to just talk about a few specific ones. So let me pull up my notes real quickly. So I think to start us off, I do just want to mention Senate Bill 210, which was the election modification bill. Thank you to Mayor Pro Tem for having some conversations around the impact around the ranked choice voting portion of the bill. I did just want to let everybody know that bill will likely proceed as it is. And then we will have an update that we'll share with council at the end. But impact overall to Broomfield hopefully will be pretty minimal. And we have some really good commitment from the Secretary of State around support and hopefully financial reimbursement for our ranked choice voting election that will be triggered or held in November of 2025. Another just quick update is Senate Bill 59. The Behavioral Health System of Care was PI'd, as well as 106. I'm sorry, Mayor, I know you spent a lot of time on that one, especially, which was the construction defect bill. That one was killed, as well as they didn't have the votes to continue to move it through the chamber. Two big bills that were introduced last week that we are not in a position on, but we have been monitoring, just to mention, was Senate Bill 230, the oil and gas production fees, and then the 229 ozone bill. Some have called it the watered down ozone bill, as we know it was a big trade-off to get to where we are. Those are moving incredibly quickly. They're already through their first chambers and into the second, as we anticipated, and with minor amendments. So we anticipate those being done by the end of the session as well. Mayor Castriata.
Yeah, not to get too far in the weeds, but would it even matter if we opposed 230 at this point, or is it one of those where the cake is baked and this is going to happen? It doesn't matter. The deal
It's
has been
baked.
done.
And if you look, it's actually, I've never seen I'm trying to remember in my time here in other states and at the federal level where I've seen a bill with that many sponsors on an introduced bill. And I cannot recall at any time. It's incredible. I think there's enough sponsors listed on the bill as it was introduced to be the vote count needed to pass it. It's pretty crazy. So it's greased, that's for sure. So, okay, good question though. Okay, let's see. So those are the big just ones that have really happened in the last little bit. Now we'll give a quick update on House Bill 1313, which was the housing and transit-oriented communities. Saturday was a really long and fast, interesting night on this bill. So it did move on second reading in the second chamber, which is the Senate. We actually thought we had the votes that maybe it wasn't going to go, and we were surprised by a couple swing votes. For example, Zenzinger, who's been a hard no on this bill, voted in support of it. So we had a bunch of head scratching on Saturday night. However, it is scheduled to go up today. And the most recent update that I have from the group is that it will go, they're doing special orders, and then it will be third reading. So we are continuing to work on amendments. It feels like it's too late, right? But we will continue until it either dies or passes to try to make it the best bill that we can for Broomfield. There was an amendment that Senator Winter ran on Saturday night to grant local governments the ability to apply for exemptions for parcels to DOLA for unforeseen circumstances. So a good example is Adams County has all these gravel pits, right, that they've gotten into the bill because they're never going to develop these gravel pits. Well, we recognize as a local government, we may not be able to think of everything that needed to be exempted from this bill. And so this new amendment essentially says, we honor that, and we're going to give the local government the ability to go to DOLA and say, hey, this came up. We can't actually zone it to this hog. Therefore, we need an exemption. And then DOLA has the discretion to decide if they grant the exemption or not. So it wasn't a huge win, but it does make the bill slightly better. Where we're trying to focus our efforts right now is the density requirement. So as a reminder, it's still written at 40 DU per acre, which was what was originally in the bill. Since the initial feedback staff gave council in February, that was a concern. It's a concern we share with all the local governments. I know CCAT, CC4CA, and CML are still talking about it. So what we're trying to propose is some range of saying, okay, if you don't want to take 40 out, then say it can exceed 25% of current zoning, but no less than 20 or something like that. So essentially it gives local government still some latitude. It's a concept we floated today that seems to be getting ground with the membership groups. I'm not sure it's going to make ground with the administration or the bill sponsors, but more to come. I do want to let you know, and thank you, Mayor, the HUTF and the injunction were removed from the bill in the Senate. There is still a lot of preemption in the bill, however. And so the big
But do
challenge.
they have any enforcement mechanism? What if we don't rezone? What happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm looking at you, Nancy. I think with the preemption, it's still a violation of law without the injunction, right?
I know, but we don't have to do it.
Right. And
Right.
It
Okay.
is sort of interesting, like what they could do to force you to adhere to this law, like a writ of mandamus. Yeah. I don't know how somebody would enforce that. Let me think about that and I'll get back to you, Mayor, without the injunction.
Yes, please. Thank you.
What's the likelihood that that would, is gonna stay in the conference bill?
That's what I was just going to talk about. So that's our battle right now. And then it has to go to conference committee with the House to see if they can agree with these changes made in the Senate. Councilmember Marshall Olson, I've heard everything from they're good with it to absolutely they will say no, it's not okay. It's changing daily. If you listen to the testimony on Saturday night, it was heated. I don't know, it's very heated even within the Democratic caucus and within the leadership. So that's changing every conversation I have. So I wouldn't go on the record to say either way, but we will work on it all the way through that piece to make sure it doesn't get added back in. Any other questions on 1313? And I think the thing for everybody to know is based on this, I still think that we have made improvements of the bill, but those core concerns that were identified by staff from the beginning remain, right? So, we've been asked, if we give you this, would you move to a support position? And I don't think the bill is anywhere in that. So we'll just continue to work on that formal amend position that council gave the direction on back in February. Okay, great. Then let's see. Sorry, Jean, I'm trying to read your message. Yep, I'm working very heavily with Anita right now. We've been in constant contact on that density. So Councilmember Lim put in the chat that CC4CA is working on that density requirement. That idea that I just floated is getting pretty good traction with CC4CA, CCAT, and CML. And the hope would be, as a collective whole, we could go and say, hey, here's a good solution. We hear you. But I'm not sure if we'll get, again, the traction with the sponsors or the administration. But CC4CA, Councilmember Lim, has been incredibly helpful on that front. Anything else on 1313? Okay, then I think we'll move next to 1447, which was the transit reform bill. And I want to just thank everybody for their feedback that came in over the weekend and Thursday night from staff's email, because again, we're just reviewing them from a very technical perspective, and we look to you all to give us that policy direction. And it was clear there wasn't consensus of a position on this bill, which was helpful. So we're continuing to just monitor that bill. I know that Representative Lindstedt and Senator Winter had shared some of their feedback from, how they see the bill from their perspective as sponsors of the bill. And the bill was supposed to be in Senate appropriations this morning. It got pulled last minute. I've heard that they're still working on getting the support they need to get it through. But I was going to pass it to Sarah to just kind of give an update on those amendments and kind of the technical concerns that she's identified with the bill from her lens.
Thank you. Thank you, Danae. Sarah Grant, Transportation Manager of City and County of Broomfield, and really appreciate Council's feedback on Friday on the staff recommendation. And the technical reasons for staff positions have previously been shared with bill sponsors, and the time left in the session to respond were some of the reasons why the position was recommended. I did have a chance to read the letter that was submitted. And the letter from sponsors did not address the reasons why they are ignoring the accountability report's recommendation to study the board prior to making any changes. And the letter also did not address the duplicative and unfunded strategic plan study to be required of RTD. Some of the items expressed in the letter have been included in the bill due to staff's feedback, and we do appreciate that. Service councils, reports to cities and counties, and increasing service coverage are some of those items, and they're good and appreciated, but does not distract staff from the fundamental reason for the bill, which is transit reform, aka board restructuring. And primarily, we've expressed this before with council as well as the bill sponsors. The bill is ignoring the accountability report recommendation to study the board, and instead deferring to a TLRC appointed committee and giving them predetermined outcomes to change the board. And this hypocritically ignores the accountability recommendation. And this was an effort that was put together back in 2020 by the governor, the transportation chairs of the General Assembly in collaboration with RTD. To summarize their recommendation, the committee acknowledged a lack of consensus on how the structure of the RTD board affects the effectiveness of its decision-making. Neither is there clarity on the existence of a problem with the board structure, nor what problems there may be. And they recommended an investigation of the effectiveness of the RTD board structure in partnership with regional stakeholders to evaluate the historical context of RTD's board structure, define board effectiveness, success, and efficiency, and evaluate past board records for meeting the criteria. From there, determine whether or not there were any problems with the RTD board, and if so, develop a problem statement and recommendations for a solution. If a problem does not exist or inefficiencies are not found, then the board structure should remain unchanged. As I mentioned, this had been previously shared with bill sponsors, and it was not responded to in the letter that council received. Impact to Broomfield. Some of the feedback we heard, well, what is the impact of this? The bill will set into a motion a predetermined outcome to change the board and to change Broomfield's representation without the due diligence of a study that was recommended to understand what issues there may be. And current representation has helped RTD put RTD on solid financial footing, better than most transit agencies across the nation, saved hundreds of millions in taxpayer funding, including Broomfield dollars, in refinancing bonds. And those were some of the reasons in regards to that component. The secondary component was the study, the 10-year strategic plan. And as previously mentioned, the 10-year strategic plan would be a new requirement in the bill that is duplicative of the FTA required 6-year planning process. Additionally, the bill does not provide any funding for this duplicative work. And again, the first objective is still ridership. Staff acknowledges that other measures have been added, but this comes later in the bill, and ridership is still the primary focus. The impact to Broomfield on this is twofold. One, an unfunded duplicative study, potentially millions of dollars that RTD taxpayers, including Broomfield, will need to pay for. The last 6-year plan cost $4.5 million. RTD will need to do the 6-year plan and a 10-year plan at the same time to pay for consultants for 2 studies. RTD will also need to pay for staff hours to implement the secondary planning process, and RTD staff also has paid, which is paid for by district taxpayers, including Broomfield. And finally, Broomfield taxpayers will paying for this duplicative effort and is not an efficient use of funds. The second reason, as a part of an impact to Broomfield, is that staff has extremely limited resources and will need to track these 2 planning efforts and how it impacts Broomfield. Overall, staff doesn't have much of an issue with the items that have been identified in the bill that need to be studied. The recommendation is to take these considerations listed and add it to the next upcoming FTA required planning process, which is to begin very shortly to begin planning for service in 2027 and the next 6 years. This has been previously shared with bill sponsors and has continued to be ignored. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of the staff's technical perspective on the bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah. We wanted to make sure if there was an opportunity for any questions or that council had. Again, we're not in a position on the bill, so we'll just continue to monitor as it moves through the process. But wanted to just see if there were any questions outside of that, because I know there was a lot of conversation, especially with the letter coming in on Friday, which was really helpful. Honestly, it was nice to see a summary of where Representative Lindstedt and Senator Winter are on their bill, because it did change so much from introduction to Friday night. Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. So I had a chance to talk to Representative Lindstedt about this on Saturday. And one of the pieces that we talked about was the accountability um, um, report, and the idea that this was done back in 2020 or kind of set in motion in 2020. What type of action has RTD taken on that since 2020? Have they done anything, or is this just sat stale since then?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf. To answer that question, I am not sure what progress has been made. The Accountability Committee report was completed in, I believe it was towards the end of 2021. The Accountability report recommended that in approximately 2 to 3 years that this study needed to be taken place. One item, though, is that there was not clear direction on who should be participating in helping develop this next step. And perhaps there could be some guidance on taking those next steps and or requiring RTD to report on the status of this particular implementation. I will note that the bill does explicitly say that RTD will need to continue to work on the 2021 Accountability Committee recommendations, but this one in particular was ignored.
Any other questions?
Have you talked to Sarah, have you talked to Rep Lindstedt recently? Do you think it would help for us to set up a meeting? Danae?
I defer to Danae.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought about that, Mayor, getting the council's feedback on Friday. I think the challenge is it's in the Senate now, so we're kind of through that first chamber, and so we had kind of switched to working with Senator Winter on some of that feedback. So we could do another outreach, continuing to kind of share those concerns with Senator Winter. And actually, she's the one that just texted me because she also has 1313 in the fire right now, and all these big bills. And we haven't even got to property tax yet. So I think we could always resend it. It doesn't hurt to be on the record that we continue to give feedback. Again. We could do that. It is supposed to, like I said, it was supposed to go into PROPS this morning and got pulled. And of course, we always try to CC either William or Faith on those conversations so that they're aware whenever that communication goes, but realizing it's already in the second chamber. Looks like Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So here's my kind of underlying concern with everything moving here, and I'm not following this as closely as you all are, so you might be able to clarify some of this, but there's money probably coming under SB 230, like a flood of money coming into RTD that should have gone to oil and gas, like measures to help improve the air there, in my opinion. So there's a lot of money coming. Is that kind of why? Do you know how these two play together? Is there any that if you could give a little insight, that'd be super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. If anybody else has more context too, and again, there's always 50 stories and there's some truth in all of them. What one's the real story, Councilmember Anderson, I wouldn't bet on. But from what we're hearing, at least in the media release and the conversations, and I actually thought it was going to be part of that letter, is that's kind of how they tried to now sell 1447 is, oh, but then it ties to 230 and there's going to be all this money for transit. So now we have money and we are doing reform and we're making progress. And I think that for some groups that really resonated because we need money for transit. We all recognize how expensive it is, and the RTD hasn't had the funds, even though we've given a lot of money, right, to successfully implement and deliver on those expectations. However, it came at a cost. It came at a trade-off and a negotiation on ozone related legislation. And so I think for some of the counties that have been really active in the ozone space, we've all just kind of stayed in this neutral monitor. It's kind of gone silent on these bills because taking a position in one or the other could show that we are okay with that trade-off that happened. And so, Councilmember Anderson, to your question, how much money and what was negotiated to make that happen, I can't say specifically, but I will say that they have tried to connect them in the way that you have said, to say, look, it's a one-time deal. We can do reform and we can give them money. The behind the scenes picture is that came on a trade-off with those other ozone bills.
I guess there's a follow-up question, maybe Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem knows through the conversation with Rep Lindstedt, but was there any discussion of like how this is really going to benefit Broomfield in any way. Like I'm like, we really don't have, my ward isn't really served by RTD. I know there's not that much in Broomfield. So it's like, is William, Representative Lindstedt, is he kind of cognizant of that and thinking about this? And how do we really, if this money from oil and gas is going to flow to RTD, how that's going to benefit his constituents? I should have called. I have not talked to him recently.
I think that one of the things that's been driving RTD is the representation of the board. So Denver has a big stake in the board, and the southern part of the district also has a big stake in the board. And so the north, for some time, and talking with other former board members of our RTD, the north doesn't get as much representation on the board as the southern part of the district does, and so that puts us at a disadvantage when we're looking at priorities. And so the makeup of the board has always driven the idea that we are going to serve our district at the expense of other districts. And so I think that, by changing the board, there's becomes more of a conversation about what serves the entire district as a whole, as opposed to what serves just my own district. So that's the hope with that. Whether this is the right way to go about that change, I'm not convinced. But it is the idea that's on the table at this point.
Those are good questions, Councilmember Anderson. Any other questions on that 1447? Okay, before we go into property tax, that's the last one I have on the list, and I want to honor that could take some time, or maybe not, maybe it will be fast. So looks like Attorney Rogers had something.
I just wanted to follow up on the mayor's question on 1313. It really is just a denial of grant funding. You won't be deemed a transit-oriented community, and you won't be eligible for grant funding. There's a very remote possibility somebody will use this bill as a grounds for a 106 on denial, but that's not in the bill. So it's tied to money.
Thank you.
That is helpful. Thank you. Are there any other bills, like I said, knowing that there will be a full analysis of the session coming later, are there any other bills right now that are hot, timely, that we didn't talk about that people have question on before we kind of switch to property taxes? Councilmember Lim?
I just had one quick comment. We had supported SB 24-185, which was the forced pooling bill. That's sitting in second reading in the Senate. So, and it doesn't have any amendment, or no, second reading in the House. It doesn't have any amendments in the House. So I assume there's still hope that that's going to go through.
We've heard that one should be okay. I mean, again, I wouldn't bet on it, but that is what I've heard, Councilmember Lim, that it should be okay. One thing I would mention, I think I put it in one of the legislative updates, but they are able to suspend all of their rules, not all of them, but many of their procedural rules on how they notice what they're discussing and all of that. So the 24-hour requirement gets suspended at like 9 days before end of session. So it is really hard to track right now, because I'll look and then 5 minutes later, 5 new bills will be on the calendar that weren't there just a moment ago. So I'll continue. We are still watching all of those and monitoring, and I'll try to keep you posted if we hear it gets in trouble, but I have not heard that one's in trouble, even with the clock. So hopefully they'll continue to move quickly on those bills so it can get through the chamber as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Devin, that's good. Anybody else have other bills wanting an update or to share information on? Okay, then we'll jump into the property tax bill. And I want to just first off say thank you. I think we have David and Graham from our finance department, Jeff Romine from economic development, Nancy and several others who have been involved in kind of monitoring and watching this. If you weren't on the CCI call or the CCAT call this morning, at about 1:30 last night, the chart that had been shared last night and the draft bill got changed again, numbers included. It was, I think, at like 1:37 or something this morning. So the changes have still kind of been moving. However, we do believe it's baked right now into its final form for introduction. And I was just trying to check in my email to see. I still don't have an introduced bill with a number on it. It was supposed to go at 11 with a big press release with the governor, but has anybody heard that it's actually dropped? Oh, there we go. 233. Thank you,
33.
Jean. So we have a bill to go from. I'm going to assume, which is a dangerous thing to do, but I'm going to assume that that's the same bill that we just reviewed as staff, but we will go back and look at it. I think just a couple of background things that we wanted to share with the group before we kind of dive into the numbers. And if any of the staff on here, if I misspeak or, add something that's not correct, please pipe in. But I think we are overall pleased with what this bill is saying, in that from other things that had been shared in this process leading up to here, this one is not the worst case scenario that we've seen, at least for Broomfield impact. So we have made some progress, and thank you, Mayor Castriotto, for all the work that you've done on that commission. We'll go through kind of the impact on Broomfield residential, Broomfield non-residential, and then just some other impacts of the bill that impact our community, but not necessarily Broomfield. One thing that I do want to say is we had to make calculations, based on the market value for 2023. We do know market values are going to change, but it's too hard to anticipate every scenario. So similar to what you heard on CCI, where the base year that they are looking at is using the 2023 special session rates. And then everything is kind of based on that moving forward. So when we talk about impact, that's the calculations and stuff that we're going off of as well. And then I think the other piece that, so let's start with school districts to just kind of get that out of the way. So this bill talks about school districts, specifically school finance mills only. It keeps flat the residential rate for school districts at 7.15, but it does lower the commercial from 27 to 25 kind of over that course of 2025 to 2028. Overall, this is a benefit to our school districts with what they have proposed, because again, it's holding that residential rate, and they'll see that revenue, that small decrease on the commercial side, just as we're going to experience on the local government side. So that's kind of a high level summary of what our school districts are seeing. Any questions about the school district set amounts? No. Okay, great. Yes, Guyleen, it's been interesting actually to watch this conversation happen while they talk about the stabilization fee happening in tandem even last night. So yes, that is a priority for sure of this legislation, of this body. Okay, the backfill conversation. So this was covered on CCI and CCAT. We know that the state budget is grim. There's not a lot of money. So what we believe this will mean is that backfill will be prioritized for local governments that actually lose revenue. And so that's where the money will be focused, which may not necessarily be Broomfield. So want to just identify backfill is still not clear. There was a question on CCI of exactly where that backfill dollar amount is going to come from. I think they're still trying to figure that out specifically. They've said the general reserve, as we've shared, but there's still negotiations happening there. But we anticipate backfill will be very specific to governments that are impacted by these changes, so at a loss of revenue. Questions about backfill? No? Okay, let's see. Third. Again, not a perfect bill, but this is an exchange and a big compromise bill. So I think Councilmember Cohen had asked about the trade-offs with the initiatives. There's two initiatives floating around. There was Initiative 50, which is already on the ballot. And then there was a second initiative, which I think just cleared the title board, 201. Our understanding is that yes, even the last minute changes that happened at midnight, 1 a.m. this morning were because the proponents of those initiatives were not in support yet. And these last changes got them there. I appreciated CCI's candor on the call this morning of nobody wanting to bet for sure 100% that they are going to quickly pull these, but that is what we are hearing, is that what is being proposed now was the great compromise to get those ballot initiatives taken off. And for governments realizing that it's not a perfect bill, we would prefer that the state stay kind of out of those conversations. However, they're going to be involved, they're going to do it. And this is a better approach than what we could have got, and the concerns that would have come if 50 and 201 were to be on the ballot. So we anticipate those to be removed. Haven't seen anything like in writing with a promise from that side, but that's what we're hoping is coming. So the trade-off background. Councilmember Lim.
James and Austin were on CCAT too, and if they understood something different, but they can say something. But I understood CCAT to say that they were not going to pull the bills, but that they would not put their money, the opposition would not put their money behind, I'm sorry, the ballot measures. They would not put their money behind the ballot measures. So that was a distinction that CCAT made. In, like you said, nothing's in writing yet. So, but that seems to be different than what you heard in CCI.
That's interesting. Is Jay on the call yet? I know he's on a county assessor's call right now, because I'd be curious what he heard. So it was 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock were the meetings. So things keep changing, as time goes. Is Jay, he might not be able to be on yet. I'll follow up, Jean, and see if I can get some more context around that. I did hear CCI say that the hope would be that those that are in support of those initiatives, like the chamber, the big houses behind it, they're hoping will pull their support, right? So then that domino effect to what you're talking about. But I felt they were more optimistic in actually getting those removed from the ballot than just getting the support behind them removed. But it looks like Jeff has his hand up as well.
Yeah, and just to follow up, as Councilmember Lim's pointing out, and I think a couple of others heard it. So Colorado Concern has agreed that they'll pull their money. Everybody's going to pull their money, but Shields may not back down. And so he may be a lone wolf out there, and the Independence Institute kind of thing, but it may not be any real money coming in. That's really what it amounts to.
That's helpful. Thank you. Any other comments, I guess, on that compromise piece with the ballot initiatives?
Yes, I have comments. It was apparent from early in the beginning of this task force that this was window dressing, in my opinion, that the whole there was a shadow group of legislators that were really using this task force as a negotiating tool to go back and try to do anything possible to get Michael Fields and those groups to pull their more draconian tax cap measure. So a lot of what came forward was not discussed or vetted. I was against the 6% cap, which is now a 5.75. That never was mentioned. There were county commissioners that felt like they should have started higher at like a 7% and then worked their way down, but it came out as a 6. That caught some people by surprise. But I feel like some of the CCAT commissioners, Commissioner Pogue was working on the inside. So she always had this more information than everybody else about okay, what kind of a cap could we live with? I'm like, why are we talking about this? I'm not going to support a cap, but that was already arranged for. Sorry. So that's kind of where I leave it. I feel like I was a pawn, and that my voice really didn't matter there. It was just, okay, we have CML fought for an appointment. The CML appointee is Guyleen, and there was still another subgroup that was really running the show that didn't clue us into everything that was going on. So there were a lot of surprises when I would show up and I'm like, oh, I didn't know anything about this. So that was my experience. I don't think I tried to fight back the crazy, and not let anything too draconian happen. But I knew that those exemptions from last year really helped our residents, because we got a whole lot less complaints when the actual bills came out, right, this year than they did in the summer of last year when those estimates blew everybody's mind. That relief, that 55,000, if you will, made a difference in people feeling a little bit of a break. And that's why I supported keeping those for this year. Because it is about helping the people save money. You know, that was the whole goal. But I guess the other purpose was to prevent something worse from happening at the ballot, which I still don't know we can stop it. You know, all this gymnastics and giving in when I really don't know. I mean, maybe without money, it doesn't have a chance, but if people read their ballot, they're going to see a 4.5 cap and like it better than a 5.75. So it just depends, you know, what you're paying attention to. That's it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it will be interesting, not to talk on a tangent for a second, but that's not those trade-offs with Governor Polis, right? On all of the other ballot questions too, right? Like there's all these promises, but we haven't seen anything removed. So it will be interesting of what actually shows up when we get the ballot in November.
Yeah, Don asked if we're stuck with it. Yeah, Michael Fields 50 is a constitutional amendment, so it would supersede any statutory decisions being made with what's it called, 230? No, 30 something.
Yeah, 233, I think was the number.
That's why it's a big scary one, because it would lock us in the Constitution, just like Tabor and Gallagher did.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It is terrifying. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Danae. I guess my only question is, and there was some confusion with some of the county commissioners, at least on the CCI call this morning, around the language of defining local government and exempting home rule counties, municipalities, and cities and counties. Do you guys have a conclusive idea of what they really were meaning by that?
So I think I'll try to answer the question, and then Nancy or Jeff, if I misspeak, please pipe in. But so that is the local government cap that we were talking about. That it used to be at 5.75. The current bill has it at 5.5% of a cap starting in 2025 through 2028. And thank you for sharing that, Bill, from Tamara, because we didn't have that most updated. It does say that as a home rule, we're exempt from that cap. So
yeah, it's definitely in there. And interestingly, from the CCI call to this version, they also added in the exclusion for people who haven't debruced. There was a request from Arapahoe County, and that's in there now too. So home rule school districts, and then they word it differently, but non-debruced counties are the easiest way to talk about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Okay. So that's the trade-off conversation. The next piece we wanted to talk about was just a challenge that the assessors have identified specifically, obviously for Broomfield, but it's a shared concern amongst the assessors, and that's the technology capability to do this. So I think if you recall, when we talked about this, maybe just last week, we thought that some of these phase decreases were going to start with the 2024 tax year, and you'll see now they don't start until 2025. We believe that's a compromise with the assessors, recognizing that we're already in the 2023 tax year, right? Those payments are being done right now. So we only have a year to figure this out. And before, we didn't have any time. So they've given one more year holding at the special session rates. We're hopeful from an assessor standpoint that will give us time to get our systems updated. We'll have to, right? Just like everybody across Colorado if this changes. But I did just want to give that for council's background, right? Is that there will be some staffing capacity and needs that we'll have to make changes internally to our technology to be able to do these calculations and this moving forward once it's passed and we know the final numbers. So just wanted to mention that Jay's been really wonderful and working very actively with CAA, the County Assessors Association, to work on this. They were successful in getting this pushed back a year, which is wonderful. It's still going to be tight, but we'll continue to do that, and just wanted to flag that for council's awareness as well. Okay, then the next piece of the bill, let me make sure those were all the notes we wanted to share as background. All right, so then getting into the impact. So if we look at Broomfield residential and Broomfield non-residential, so just as a reminder for 2023 and 2024, again, it'd be the same, which was the 6.7 and the 55,000 value reduction. So we're looking at the same, again, from this current year that's being paid and the 2024 tax year. And then it starts to see decreases with 2025, but stays the same for 2025 through 2028 for residential. And then for non-residential, it's a little bit more complicated. It's 27.9 and 30,000 for 2023 and 2024. And then it drops down to 27% for 2025. And then it goes down to 25% for 2026 through 2028. So that biggest decrease for non-residential is between 2025 and 2026. So in all of the mathematical and calculations, and to try to, I don't know about you guys, it's hard without a visual. We've looked at kind of what that impact would be fiscally, and we'll have more hard numbers once we have a passed bill. But as I mentioned at the start of the call, this bill isn't the worst thing that could happen for Broomfield. Again, talking about the different scenarios that were proposed. We're looking at a wash in 2025 because the residential stays up and the commercial goes down, again, assuming that the market value holds. And then 2026 to 2028, we're looking at about a $2 million reduction. So to give you some round numbers of what those changes, those percentages actually mean for us as a county, when we look at just those portions of the bill. So as we talked about earlier, the rest of the bill is important, school districts, and the cap, but the cap doesn't apply to us as a home rule. So really honing in on just those residential and non-residential rates. We're looking at flat through 2025 and then a $2 million reduction, I think, is where staff landed at some round numbers. But with that, I'm going to look at Jeff and anybody else to add things that I may have missed on that summary.
You did great.
Is the 12-month payment plan still there? Because it was
I think so. Let me pull that.
concerning to obviously, assessors and taxing staff. So, but it was a request from our small business owners who are a lot of minority owned, and they just struggle. They work on really slim margins. So it was kind of debated. I don't know if it made the cut.
Danae, I think CCI said it was polled.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the
Thank you,
actual
Austin.
recent bill.
I'm just paging through it and I don't see it.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of
I think they
treasurers
pulled
and
it.
assessors said that would cause so many problems. And then also, having to, people need that money. They need the money. They can't wait till the end of the year, right? So it creates some issues on the back end, even though it's well-meaning. Okay, guess it didn't make it.
I don't
Thank
see it, Mayor.
Okay.
Good question. Any other thoughts, questions? I know it's been a lot in the last 24 hours, but I was telling the group this morning that I felt very, and I don't know, Councilmember Marshall, how you felt, but I felt really bad for a lot of the counties on the call that aren't DeBruce and aren't home rule, because this impacts them in a very different, right? Like, I mean, it's not the perfect, we just leave it, right? It's not perfect, but for those folks that aren't DeBruced already, and also that aren't home rule, so don't have that exemption on the cap, you could feel the concerns that they were sharing on the CCI call this morning that we just don't have to.
Well, like Boulder was saying, they are at a 5.5% cap anyway, and they're DeBruced, so that must be some other construct that there are several counties that have to operate and refund anyway. That's not debrucing. That's different.
So Pitkin County, for example, in their home rule charter, they actually have baked in a growth cap for revenues.
Oh, so that's what Boulder has, a growth cap in their charter.
Boulder County's not home rule.
Yeah, Boulder
So
County wouldn't have a charter.
I thought the
I don't
5.5
know.
was something
I don't
else
know where they
special.
got that, but
Well, Claire keeps saying on the CCAT thread that, and that's kind of where the 5.5 and the 5.75, I think, came, because a lot of those counties are already at that threshold. So they're like, they could live with it, but then there were also a lot of rural counties represented on the commission that were like saying, we only need 3%. I'm like, we don't provide much. We don't provide a lot of services and there's not a lot of amenities for the 400 people that live here or whatever. So they were like fine with it. So,
So the 5.5% cap is in statute and it applies to statutory counties like Boulder County.
okay. Well, that's kind of where it came from, that number, and with a little cushion. But that's interesting that some of the counties feel like this would be really hard for them to deal with. Because
Well, I think some of their concerns, so like Uray County, for example, they said this is the first year since the Great Recession that they've fully recovered financially. And so to cap at 2023 numbers, which is before they fully recovered, they feel hindered. And Arapahoe County felt that they were being hindered because since they don't grow at the same rate that some other counties get to grow at, they are at a disadvantage.
well, that's interesting.
Because they haven't debruced, so they get to operate in I guess, a fun little mixture of statute plus what paper requires.
Jeffco hasn't debruced, and Jeffco is also, I guess, gonna be impacted by this, but you should have seen Andy Kerr. His hand was flying up to support all of it. And he was like, I love it all. It's just so expensive. And I'm like, yeah. So he was voting for all of it. Just saying. I know. All right. But the deal was done. Like the votes were there. I think what helped keep it from being truly crazy is that there were a lot of county commissioners on that board. I mean, we were all over the place, granted, but for the most part, we prioritize services, being able to provide, mandated services and such. So that helped keep it from going too crazy.
Did you guys have any other questions? So I think just kind of path forward then to talk through for, I guess, any other questions on the property tax bill? Okay, I think one of the things that was obvious to me that was challenging for our membership groups this morning was, right, they were all asked to take a position on a bill that hadn't been formally introduced. And we all know that it is incredibly hard. It's not advised unless you're really writing the bill, which I will give major shout out to, especially CCI and CCAT and staff that have really spent a lot of time with the commission and trying to make this conversation better, whether heard or not. We are appreciative of that. Knowing that this is going to move fast. So again, the timeline hearing, introduction today, House committee today, through the House, introduction to the Senate tomorrow, Senate committee tomorrow, and then through the Senate on the last day. And knowing also that we are kind of in this, we're not going to change, we've been told, right? The amendments that I think they were willing to talk about around the TIF and some of that were already incorporated into the introduced bill. Our suggestion is to just continue to monitor it. We're at the table, we're having the conversations, but that will also ensure that we have staff time dedicated to these big other bills in play where we can influence them, like 1313 and some of those other ones. But wanted to share that what we were envisioning the path.
Did you talk about Front Range Passenger Rail?
I did not talk about the infrastructure bill. No.
Well, we don't have to, but I think that's another one of those things. It's what'd you call it? It's greased. It's gonna pass. It's greased. The wheels are greased. It's gonna sail through, and nobody can stop it. Nobody can stop that train.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up really fast, Mayor. That's not one I had.
I personally won't support it though. Doesn't do anything for Broomfield.
Let's see. Infrastructure. Sarah, I'm having a brain fart. What number is that bill?
184.
184. Because then if they're actually going to go forward with another ballot tax in November to pay for it, I'm not going to ask our voters to pay another tax for a train that's not gonna benefit them. I'm just not. They're still paying fast tracks till what, 2050? We're locked in. So,
So-
this
They'll
is me
pay fast tracks
personally.
in perpetuity.
It's in perpetuity?
Yeah, they don't have a sunset for that. 2050 is when the train is supposed to arrive.
Oh, thanks, Austin.
Yeah, that's helpful. Just, that bill already passed, Mayor, it just passed, so.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's baked, it's not even greased.
Yeah, I
yet.
know,
That thing
I
is
know.
baked, so.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Cool.
So that one is done. Okay, so then back to the property tax again, knowing that it was just introduced today, staff will continue, will be in a monitor position. Again, we're not gonna influence amendments and I mean, we're not like cheering for its passing, right? I think that there's kind of that balance and it's going. So we'll just continue to monitor. If council has questions again, we all look to you guys for that direction. If something changes, please let us know, but we'll continue on that path otherwise and continue to focus our efforts with the Ponte Busam on those big bills that I discussed earlier that are still in the pike right now. And we will have a lot of updates for you all once we can process this session that will quickly hopefully end on Wednesday. So we'll get the recording out to you all. Reach out if you have any questions, and otherwise we'll just keep chugging along.
thank you so much, Danae, and everybody who's been plugging along. I appreciate you, Jeff, Sarah, everyone. So thanks again, Nancy, Dan, everybody who's been helping in this session. So go team. Almost done.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
You guys too. See you tomorrow. Bye.